Hi friends, I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of my experience using amateur radio with digital nets today. I think in the text I described pretty well the sort of what a net is and how it flows. And at the end of this video, I'm going to splice in a little bit of a recording from a net where I was net control last Thursday night. So probably one of the first things I want to call out is that, when you talk to somebody in person, anybody can speak and cut people off. And it's very different. I mean, it's rude to do that oftentimes, or maybe it's not if you want to make a point or if you want to correct an error. But there's sort of this give and take in conversation. Whereas on a radio, it's what we call simplex. Only one person can talk at a time. You can't both talk and listen. So you really need to be aware of other people and think about when it's time to stop talking and start listening again. This personally makes me very uncomfortable. I don't really talk much in public unless I'm giving a professional speaking engagement. So I'm always thinking, have I gone on too long? Am I boring? Have I lost everybody? So whereas in a group, I'm just quiet and that's okay. But the whole point of being on the radio and talking is to talk when it's your turn to talk. And that's a lot more challenging for me. Sort of related to that, you have body language and eye contact when you're in person, and that sort of tells you when you're going on too long. Have you held the audience? Do people agree? Of course, you don't have any of those cues at all when you're on the air. So you just sort of have to watch the flow of the conversation unfold over a much, much slower period of time. Another thing that I personally find challenging is that typically there's one person, the net control operator, steering the conversation on the air. When you talk face to face, it's not really a good idea to have one person monopolize a conversation. So the net control station is responsible for keeping the conversation flowing. They determine who should speak next and guide the contents of the conversation. In the case of, say, an emergency communications net, where I'm more comfortable with, that's mostly a matter of, am I carrying messages from and to the right stations? Is the Red Cross shelter getting what they need from the county? That kind of thing. In a social net like the one I'll play a bit of a recording of, it's a lot different. There you're sort of keeping the conversation going. Somebody will say something and you may want to throw in something. Gee, that reminds me of. Oh, can you tell me about? And just sort of keep that going so that everybody can talk. That sort of a social net is called rag chewing, for what it's worth. I'm much more comfortable with the emergency nets because we have a set goal. Get information from where it's being originated to where it's needed. And that's part of that is because I've been trained to do it, and part of it's because I'm shy. So the social rag chewing nets are a little bit more of a challenge for me. Another interesting thing that's sort of an artifact of being on radio is sometimes not everybody hears everybody else. Pretty much if you're in a conversation face to face, you see and hear the people you're talking to. Whereas with radio, it would be very much as if you were sitting at a long table and somebody at the end of the table said something and the person sitting across from you repeated everything they said afterwards so you could hear it. Some nets may have 50, 100 people checking in, and when that happens, you have people relaying stations, and so you really need to be prepared for listening for that, and letting things flow and getting things secondhand far more so than you do face to face. Finally, there's just sort of the reliability aspect. Most of the nets I attend are actually digital nets that go through these things called hotspots. And like most digital technology, it's very reliable, but not always. You can have packet loss, which is where bits of the audio cut out. You've probably heard that on a cell phone in an area where you have poor communication, poor signal strength, and all of a sudden somebody's voice will start and stop. You may also have something that just doesn't work. Maybe your internet goes down. Maybe the protocol between your radio and the hotspot, or your radio and what's called a repeater connected to the internet. Maybe that protocol loses track of itself and suddenly you just can't transmit for a while. So there's a little bit more excitement, and stress is probably the wrong word, but I tend to get a little bit more on pins and needles when I'm doing radio things when I'm talking, because if I talk with you, odds are you're going to hear me. And we may miscommunicate, but we miscommunicate about what we're talking about, the subject. It's very rare that if you're standing next to me and I'm standing next to you, that I'm just not going to hear what you're saying. Whereas with radio, it might very well be that I hear the first half of what somebody says and then they just disappear for a while. And that sort of gives you new modes of thinking about how to communicate, asking people, what was the last thing you said? I got everything up to where you said. Calling station, can you please repeat your call sign again? All these things are sort of a protocol in place to I guess, addressed a lot of that, as well as just sort of a little bit of letting go. If you don't hear a station after they check into the net, maybe they've gone away. Maybe they can't reach the net. Don't hold things up. Go on to the next station. So that's a little bit about amateur radio and nets and sort of the differences between the two. I'm going to close this video with a screen capture of the receiver I used to record a bit of a net on Thursday, and then just a little bit of me operating this net control of the net. I'm going to pick it up in the middle as I take the last of the check-ins and move on to the first station that has something to say. So thanks for listening.
Kilo November 6, Golf Alpha Bravo, KN6 DAB, Steve in Fair Oaks, California. KK6 LBH, Angelo. I knew we had more out there. Thank you, Steve and Angelo. Net Control acknowledges KN6 GAB and KK6 LBH. Let's pause there for a minute and we'll start the round table. I'll look for check-ins in a couple minutes. Steve, W6MNL, your comments for the net, please. Yeah, real good. You're sounding real good, Boulder Creek. Net Control, really good. Yeah, comments, just step out, get a little out of the cabin, get out of cabin fever here in Sable. Beautiful evening, lightly clouded, no rain yet, possible. But real good, just checking in.